You're listening to the Modern Mainframe, BMC's intelligent Z optimization and transformation podcast, covering the latest trends and issues on the mainframe and how BMC AIME and BMC Compuware Solutions can help you build a mainframe-inclusive DevOps toolchain. Hey everyone, welcome to the Modern Mainframe. I'm Matt Dallaire. In previous episodes, as well as blog posts, ebooks, and other assets, we've discussed the benefits of using hybrid cloud technology to manage mainframe data. Today we'll be talking not just about why a shift to hybrid cloud data management is a good idea, but also why now. Joining me for today's conversation are Intellyx analyst and managing partner Jason Bloomberg, BMC senior product manager Zelberzvig, and director of solution engineering Tim Ceradsky. Jason, Tim, thanks for being here today.
Pleasure to be here.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
So Jason, I'll start things off with you. Can you explain why using the hybrid cloud for mainframe data management is no longer an option, but a strategic imperative for CIOs?
Well, I would say there's three basic ways to answer that question, and we'll get into it all on the podcast. So first of all, there's risk reduction, right? There are risks to keeping mainframe data solely on the mainframe, cybersecurity risks, compliance risk, and other risks. So managing and mitigating risk is a top priority. Cost savings as well, right? There could be costs involved with older approaches to data protection that are costing too much, and there's ways to save money. But really, the most important one is essentially the top line benefit, right? Business benefits to leveraging mainframe data in a hybrid cloud scenario. So for better AI, for better analytics, for better business intelligence. And we'll go into all of these during this podcast.
So there's also an aspect of cost optimization. Tomer, how can transitioning to hybrid cloud data management help organizations reduce operational expenses and liberate themselves from the constraints of legacy systems?
So I think in my view, there are several key factors that need to take into consideration when talking about the savings. It's not only stepping away from backups to tape, which is essentially a new thing, but it's also stop using tape altogether. So it's the floor space of the VTL that they used in the past, cooling, power, the general CPU consumption, software licenses, all that combined can cost a lot of money, and optimizing that consumption by using cloud object storage and more newer solutions can actually be more cost effective. But also the manual intervention required to managing this kind of legacy systems and eliminating the downtime when you do maintenance for physical tapes can also save on costs in that area.
I think that leads really well into my next question, which is about reducing complexity. Legacy systems often create complex and siloed data environments. How does using hybrid cloud simplify data operations and administration? And what benefits does this simplification bring to the organization?
As clients no longer need to manage tapes, whether it's virtual or physical, all the complexity that we just discussed is now gone. There's no need to run those tape-related processes like reclaim, sync, and all the different processes for tape management. No need to perform upgrades to the tape infrastructure every once in a while. Everything is now cloud-based storage, so those kind of on-prem processes no longer needs to happen. And sometimes in those areas when you need to go from one vendor to another, that adds another layer of complexity because it requires you to purchase another piece of software that allows you to copy data from one tape vendor to another. All that is gone with cloud object storage. And you also get the data redundancy with object storage. So by default, for example, in AWS case, the data is spread across 3 availability zones in the same region. That means you don't have to assemble grid solutions for VTL in 3 sites to gain that same redundancy level. You get that out of the box with cloud object storage.
Yeah, I would add to that too, that Matt, because I think that's a really crucial point about why this is such an interesting technology area to explore for companies, because legacy IT systems, mainframe and others that have been there for a long time, they've really built up a lot of complexity. And to be able to do things, it all comes down to how you approach the problem. And if you're trying to solve a tape problem and you do it by emulating tape and you do it by trying to keep as many of the processes that you've built over time the same, and then you just change one small thing, that tends to lead to a very complex environment. And one of the really nice things about this solution is that it cuts through a lot of that additional complexity that's just sort of built up over time because it had to, because of the way that the industry approached the problem. And this gives companies the ability to start with a clean sheet of paper in some cases without throwing out all their knowledge, but it allows them to create shortcuts to be able to achieve the same effects and much more. And I think that's a huge part of why this is interesting to our clients.
There's also a sense of urgency here, especially when it's time for that hardware refresh, right? Tape systems have to be updated every few years. The tapes themselves, can potentially wear out, so you have to replace those as well. And if you're nearing one of those refresh cycles, then that's a good opportunity to look at hybrid cloud as an alternative, because you're going to need to spend a lot of money to do that tech refresh. And if it's not necessary, then you can optimize costs by changing the strategy. But perhaps the most important reason to move away from both tape and virtual tape is that with cloud object storage, you essentially can access any record anytime, right? It's not just for backing up, it's also for providing additional use of the data. Recovering a single record from tape or even virtual tape, because virtual tape follows still the linear interfaces that tape provides, right? It emulates tape's linear approach. It becomes difficult to do, to say, I want a single record off of some tape. So people don't do it, right? Because it's just difficult. But with object storage in the cloud, you can access any record you want. You can do searches and you can do other sorts of data recovery that gives you a lot more flexibility. So there's a lot of upside as well as the cost savings and complexity reduction.
So with mainframe data volume increasing, does that also increase the imperative to find a new solution or find a better way to handle its management?
I think from my point of view, mainframe data has always been important. It's the top level and where the crown jewels of most companies are kept is their mainframe data. Some stats say 90% of all business critical data lives still on the mainframe. But what we're finding too is that the value of that data is so high that we need to provide better protection, more flexible protection, but then also provide access to it. And so a lot of companies have been built or put in really complex solutions to access that information that lives on the mainframe, and they create entire big infrastructures to do this, and that raises costs of their CPU, that raises costs of their other software because of the way that they consume it. And that's created this snowball effect that AV Cloud cuts right through that Gordian knot. It gets right to the heart of it and says, hey, we can not only protect your data, but we can also provide access to it. And so now it's just made that valuable data more accessible in a well-governed way. It really solves multiple issues simultaneously and really helps put a focus on the value of that data.
Yeah, if you keep all your mainframe data on the mainframe, then as the quantity of data increases, so does your cost, right? The more data, the more money, and it's sort of a very sort of straightforward relationship. In the cloud, though, there are more options because cloud providers offer different levels of data storage, hot, medium, cold, which have different response times and correspondingly different cost structures. So depending upon your strategy, you can have mainframe data in the cloud at different temperatures, as they say, that depending upon how you might want to use the data and how fast you need to recover the data. And that can save you money, where you can come up with these more sophisticated cost management strategies that just aren't an option if you keep all your data on the mainframe exclusively.
Tomer, how is hybrid cloud data management uniquely suited to securing against the escalating threat of cyber attacks, especially with the increased sophistication of ransomware attacks?
So in terms of cyber attacks and all the cyber threats that mainframes are present today, I think cloud object storage provides you with the ability to create those immutable backups that you need to have that golden copy that you need to recover from in case of an attack. Let's say someone encrypts your entire system. You'll be able to recover from that golden copy because it's not on-prem. It resides on a different site that wasn't affected by that cyber attack. You can ensure that this data is immutable by leveraging that cloud object storage capability of object locking, for example, in AWS. And of course, it will also give you the ability to actually recover anywhere in the world. So let's say the primary site was hit with a cyber attack and you can no longer recover there. You can also recover on your secondary site or a new site for that matter. As long as you have network connectivity, just bring the data back from object storage. It's available there.
So many CISOs are going to be looking at the ransomware problem with respect to the mainframe and say, well, we're going to have all these protections that are going to keep the ransomware, keep the malware off the mainframe. But the whole premise of this discussion is that the ransomware is going to succeed, right? You have to assume that the ransomware will be able to compromise mainframe data. So the strategy has to be one of protecting your data and recovering from the ransomware attack. Yes, you want to keep the malware out, and obviously you're going to try that, but you also have to assume that it is going to be successful, at least to some extent. So that's why it's so important to have a strategy that doesn't assume the mainframe is invulnerable to ransomware, that assumes that, yes, even on the mainframe, the ransomware is going to get through and corrupt data. And so you have to have protection off the mainframe, which would mean in the hybrid cloud, that takes advantage of object locking and other strategies that, immutable data that cannot be corrupted by ransomware. And that's so important because if you don't have that, then the ransomware attacks will go after your backups, right? And that's one of the challenges is that the ransomware technology continues to advance, if anything, even faster than protections against it.
So data breaches can have a lot of effects, ranging from reputation loss, customers leaving, but there's also a compliance aspect to it. And we're hearing a lot about new standards and regulations regarding financial data, like the European Union's Digital Operational Resilience Act, or DORA, Sheltered Harbor Standards, Security and Exchange Commission regulations in the U.S., the Hong Kong Banking System Standard, Secure Tertiary Data Backup, or STDB. Jason, can you speak a bit to how these standards reach beyond the financial sector and how hybrid cloud data management not only helps ensure compliance with them, but with other regulatory mandates?
Yeah, this is an important point, right? You listed a number of regulations that are in the works that apply to specific companies and specific geographies. So you might think that if you're not in that particular industry or you're not in that geography, then they don't apply to you, and you could, breathe a sigh of relief. But in reality, essentially, you have to achieve compliance with the most stringent regulations around the world, even if they don't specifically apply to you. And we saw this with GDPR, right? GDPR is only in Europe, but everywhere else in the world, everybody has to essentially comply with GDPR anyway. One, because they may be doing business in Europe, but two, because the customers expect that level of compliance, right? So the customers expect, in the case of GDPR, protection of their own information that big companies have, even if they're not based in Europe. And it's the same thing with resilience, right? The whole point to having regulations that require a certain measure of resilience is that it's becoming now a global standard for resilience that every organization has to comply with, whether or not there's a specific regulation in that particular industry or geography. So even though DORA may be in Europe, only financial services, it's still a regulation that everybody should be paying attention to. And you want to be proactive with regards to your resilience policies and procedures, because not only because you may have a regulatory requirement specific to you, but because customers are going to expect that level of resilience.
Just to add to that, I don't think it's just the customers, but I think from regulatory reasons, you get fines if you don't meet those standards. So you have to meet with the regulation or else you get fined. I think it was a very high number of a percentage of your profit. So organizations have a lot to lose if they don't comply.
Tim, have you spoken with anybody out in the field about approaches they're taking as they prepare for or adopt these new regulations?
I would say it's a part of pretty much every client conversation to one degree or another. Every client has to wrestle with these regulations, how they look at their way that they do their data governance and how they apply their tools to support that. And that's what really drives a lot of behavior and a lot of decisions, is trying to land a very complex system that delivers on those needs, and they become hard and fast business needs and regulations to follow. So it's definitely something that every company has to grapple with. There's really very few companies that don't operate in multiple markets. So they have to not only understand their home market, but they have to understand other places they do business. And so they're building out systems with those things in mind. So being able to provide them the opportunity to tackle some of these problems in different ways than they've traditionally been able to do it. That's really a very fascinating conversation for a lot of folks, because it becomes a art of the possible conversation, as opposed to, well, I've got this, and this technology, and now I need to follow those specific standards, or, in a technical standard way. And it allows them to rethink their whole strategy in a very positive way and create things that don't rely on 30-year-old sequential technologies that force them into very, very rigid decisions, which usually don't work well with the new regulations. It makes it very hard, and they have to spend a lot more money to be compliant with an older technology because it wasn't designed with that in mind.
Yeah, I believe DORA fully goes into enforcement in January of 2025. So there's a bit of urgency behind this, that companies need to act now to prepare ahead of time, rather than rushing at the last minute or relying on outdated systems.
Definitely. Yeah, I would completely agree with that. That companies that aren't looking at and re-examining their systems with that in mind and evaluating it, doing the audits of their compliance with these regulations now, I'm not seeing very many that aren't wise enough to do that. Every so often you do run into a client that hasn't picked that particular thing up. They're all busy. We're all running and busy, and there's a lot of demands on their time. But this is definitely something that I think most clients are either on the cusp of picking up and looking at and wrestling with, or they've already been doing it for several months.
I think it's worth pointing out that there's nothing in DORA or the other regulations that are encouraging any companies to get rid of their mainframes, right? If anything, the mainframe is understood to be a highly resilient system in and of itself. Really, the challenge here is how to come up with the best resilience for the organization overall, which is usually some sort of hybrid technology strategy. So for organizations that have mainframes, combining mainframes with hybrid cloud and what it can bring to the table is often the way to achieve the best resilience overall, not just for mainframe data on the mainframe, but really for the organization, right? Because regulations don't get into specifics of technology implementations. They never have. That's not really the role of regulations. They provide sort of business requirements for that now the technology organizations have to figure out how to comply with. And so the question then is, well, what is the best way to comply with these resilience requirements? And that is typically some sort of combination of mainframe and hybrid cloud for those organizations that already have mainframes.
Now, to go in a bit of a different direction, managing your mainframe data in the hybrid cloud also opens it up for analytics using artificial intelligence and machine learning. Tomer, how does the hybrid cloud enable organizations to harness the power of AI for data-driven decision-making? And why is this crucial in today's data-centric business landscape?
So up until today, those decision-making systems, the AI and ML solutions, they didn't really have access to the mainframe data. So imagine you have petabytes of data sitting there on the floor space of your primary site, not accessible to those systems that actually need this data to make the best business decision for your organization. Now with hybrid clouds, since the data is now residing on cloud object storage, those solutions can actually access that data. It's no longer locked away in a tape in some closet or a virtual tape or whatever in a proprietary mainframe format. Now the data is cloud object storage. It's open. It's in a standard format like a JSON, a CSV, a Parquet format. that can be consumed and read by the AI and ML and processed properly. It will allow you to make the best business decision based on pure data and not just a subset of it. So up until today, clients were leveraging an ETL process or an ETL approach to get a subset of the mainframe data. But now with hybrid clouds, you need to get all the data to make the best decision, not just a decision based on a subset of it. I think, in my view, you need to see the full picture before you make a business decision that can affect your entire organization. With hybrid cloud, that's exactly what you can achieve with.
In the context of AI, that challenge, you mentioned just that brief phrase, your proprietary mainframe data format, that is going to strike fear in the hearts of that AI analyst, the data scientist or data analyst who needs to prepare the data for the AI models, right? Proprietary formats can just throw a wrench into that whole process. And when we say proprietary format, we mean different things, right? It could be EBCDIC versus ASCII or Unicode. It could be how data are represented in databases, integer formats, floating point formats, string formats, right? Mainframes deal with those somewhat differently. And that kind of thing, right? Just representing an integer differently can throw a wrench into your entire AI model, right? So all those things have to be cleaned up. And then, as you mentioned, JSON as well, right? So at that content level, dealing with JSON and various applications of JSON in terms of the context of the data, all of that should be all cleaned up in order for that AI analyst, the data scientist, to be able to prepare the data appropriately for the models. So that shouldn't be. You shouldn't have to rely upon a traditional transform step, the T in ETL, to clean all that up, right? That's an older technology that was really not intended for preparing data for AI. It really requires much greater sophistication in terms of the technology that will now make mainframe data a full-blown participant in this modern data context, whether it's data lakes that perform the transformation on the fly as opposed to as part of the preparation of the data, as well as preparing data for AI purposes.
And it's also a big cost driver in a lot of organizations, that just that act of transforming the data. And when you think about feeding the engine of analytics, if you do it outside of other processes, then you've got to account for the work, the toil that has to happen to make that work. So in most scenarios, most solutions that existed before EME Cloud, you did that transformation on platform. You would write mainframe routines and you would go in and transform that data and then ship out the new format, either FTP at some place that you could then consume it with your analytics engine or whatever. But the dirty secret of all that is that cost cycles, because you're writing that code and you're running it on the main processors, and that costs you MIPS, that costs you usage, and that can be very expensive, not just on this machine itself, but it can actually raise the cost of every piece of software that you license for that mainframe because of the way that mainframe software is licensed. So the revolutionary part about what we're doing with EME Cloud Analytics is that we don't transform on the platform, we transform in the cloud. And that flips the script entirely on that cost model. And so that really can change the dynamics of this, add a lot more access to this information. We're doing we're doing a very simple thing in some respects, and we're doing a very complex thing in other respects in providing that access to that information and putting it in the hands of the people that can do something with it. And so I think of it as you could leave all your money in a bag under your bed. Money being tapes at this point. You back up your corporate data to tapes and you stick them in a silo or wherever, and they just sit there until you need to go get them, just like that bag under your bed. But if you put your money out and invest it, you're going to get more value from that, the value that you've already created. And I think that's where the analytics part of this really just supercharges the whole strategy.
I think that might lead into my next question, which is regarding workforce challenges. We've heard a lot about mainframe professionals reaching retirement age, that there's a skills gap throughout IT, that there's a shortage of talent out there. Jason, how does managing data in the hybrid cloud address this workforce challenge?
Yeah, there are some subtleties to this whole discussion of the retiring mainframe workforce. It's not quite as simple as you might think. I mean, sort of the superficial way of looking at it is you have these old mainframers, they're all dying off and retiring, and then you have this new group of millennials or whoever it is that have never seen the mainframe and it's completely alien to them, and what are they going to do, right? That's oversimplified. That's overly simplistic. Reality is, if you look at the next generation of professionals, the 20-somethings and 30-somethings who are techies, who are have technical careers, have technical backgrounds, they're perfectly capable of getting up to speed on the mainframe, whether they're developers or operators or whatever their role is. So it's not a question of not having the skills. It's a question of helping those people, encouraging them to incorporate the mainframe into their careers and to make the most of the mainframe capabilities that they have, right? So it's more about shifting the way that mainframe vendors in particular approach mainframe software, more so than simply saying, well, all these people are going to retire and then we're stuck, right? That's not really this, is a much more subtle point than that. So within the enterprises that have mainframes, it's important to understand, well, everybody in your technology organization is going to have this distributed hybrid context for their careers and for the work that they do. And the mainframe has to be part of that context, right? The mainframe is one other type of server that has its advantages and disadvantages, just like any other server, whether it's on premises or in the cloud, right? And from the professional technologist perspective, it's the right tool for the job. The mainframe is the right tool for certain things. Cloud is the right tool for other things. On-premises distributed systems are the right tools for other things, right? So it's more about encouraging people to build their careers that incorporate the mainframe into this modern way of leveraging technology than simply saying, well, we have to do a generational shift and that's all there is to it.
Yep. I can tell you that's been the last almost 10 years of my career, has been working with clients on, if I had to sum it up, that's the nutshell that I would sum it up as, is it's realizing that the mainframe is just another platform, and we've allowed ourselves as a mainframe culture to get locked into this idea that we have to do things a certain way. And by opening up the eyesight and the perspective on this and being able to take advantage of all these really cool things that are being done out in the world, that's what a lot of what we've been doing is providing tools, providing a developer experience that's better, that allows people to access it. Even, your OG, type of mainframe developers who've been doing green screens for 30 plus years, when they have access to better tooling, they can be more productive. And we've seen it time and time again. And Amy Cloud is just another example of providing access from the mainframe platform to really cool tooling that we're taking the value there. We're bringing the value of the mainframe to this. And it doesn't matter how old you are. It doesn't matter, you obviously have to have some technical experiences here and there, but it's easy to learn. And getting away from this proprietary, it's got to be a certain type of tape technology. It's got to be a certain type of software that you all have to basically be inducted into a priesthood to understand. We're getting rid of all that. And that's what's making it really powerful for companies that are trying to reskill and be able to address this, because now they can take the same Linux capabilities or, maybe an AWS or GCP or Azure skill set and leverage those with the mainframe as well. And it really, again, changes the dynamic a lot.
Tomer, can you explain how hybrid cloud solutions provide scalability and flexibility for mainframe data management?
So I touched on it briefly before. I talked about the fact that the data is redundant because it resides on 3 different availability zones, which adds another layer of scalability for the data in terms of that. But the world of hybrid cloud, especially in the world of AI and ML, scalability and flexibility is really important. So the more amount of data you want to process, you need to scale more, and you need to have the flexibility to grow both in terms of storage because you need to store more data, but you also need more resources to process this data. So when you're on an on-prem solution or mainframe for that matter, there is a limitation to how much you can grow, both in terms of CPU, memory, storage. You're limited to the physical on-prem solution you have. With the cloud, it's you can choose the pay-as-you-go model where you can grow as much as you need and you can put on as much resources as you need to process and create that flexibility and scalability that you need to process this data. Now, in terms of mainframe data management, especially in the demanding AI and analytics solutions world, you would need to store massive amounts of data and ensure that they're safely stored in the cloud. So scalability is really important for mainframe, especially for mainframe clients.
Yeah, it's important to understand that the mainframe and the cloud have different scalability models, right? The mainframe was built on a vertical scalability model, right? You need more capacity, you pay for more MIPS, or perhaps upgrade to the next bigger mainframe if you need to do that. And in the cloud, you have as much horizontal scalability as you want. The cloud providers essentially provide an infinite number of servers for you. You just have to pay for them, right? So it's not that one approach is better than the other, right? They both cost more money to scale. You're either paying for more MIPS or paying for more cloud resources. So understanding the how to optimize costs is always a bit of a black art, right? There's no obvious answer. It depends upon your situation. And it's also important to realize that different kinds of scalability serve different purposes, right? It's not like the cloud is going to, because it's horizontally scalable, it's going to replace the vertical scalability of the mainframe. On the contrary, there are very important reasons to have vertical scalability in a core transaction processing system. That's where you need vertical scalability. So it's really about understanding how those two kinds of scalability approaches complement each other more so than trying to figure out which one is better than the other.
Yep. A very closely associated part of this too with scalability and flexibility is performance. Because if you look at traditional tape backup, it's a sequential I/O operation. You can scale by putting in more tape drives, but those are very limited resources in most shops. You may have dozens of tape drives, but you still are your backups are running sequentially to those drives. There's solutions to that, but they have all their pluses and minuses. But the scalability of the cloud, it gives us the ability to really take advantage of parallelism. And so what was really probably the most remarkable thing to me in coming and looking at AV Cloud was the performance, because I'm a storage guy. I grew up in storage, spent time with lots of different storage vendors and offering virtual tape and other systems. And the sheer performance that we're able to achieve with AV Cloud, upwards of 4 times as fast as a local tape drive, was absolutely mind-blowing. But once I looked at it and understood the parallelism that we achieve by being able to write to a more flexible and scalable solution with object storage, it became clear. And so I think that's something that our clients, as they look at this and they start to figure out, wow, hey, this could actually be very viable for my backup strategy. It actually saves me time on my nightly backup cycle. It saves me time on resource. It saves me all the extra processing that I put into transforming data. It's pretty remarkable when you see applying a different paradigm to this.
We've covered a lot of ground regarding hybrid cloud management for mainframe data, but I'd like to get each guest's opinion on why this is an urgent need. Jason, any final thoughts?
Well, I think the most important reason, we talked about compliance, we talked about the challenges of tape and dealing with tape, but I think the most important reason are the business benefits of leveraging mainframe data in a hybrid cloud scenario, primarily for driving AI, but also business intelligence and analytics, because there the sky's the limit, right? You can extract increasing value from your data as you explore different options leveraging hybrid cloud. But the final point I would want to make is that none of this discussion is meant to suggest that the mainframes are any less useful or valuable, or that moving to hybrid cloud means that that you have any less reason to have a mainframe. On the contrary, the hybrid cloud brings additional value to having a mainframe platform in place, right? Because now the mainframe data, which is still there, is still being generated by all the core capabilities that mainframes have always offered. That mainframe data is now more valuable, which means the mainframe is even more valuable, even though you're leveraging mainframe data in the hybrid cloud. So this is a way of really getting a win-win scenario, right? It's a win for the mainframe part of the organization, it's a win for the hybrid cloud part of the organization, and it's a win for the business and its customers overall.
That's a great point. Tim, any closing thoughts?
I agree wholeheartedly with Jason. Nothing about what we're doing devalues the mainframe. In fact, it just simply takes away some of the disadvantages of being on some people would describe as legacy. I would describe it as incredibly long-lived and valuable platform that is powering industry, and being able to take some of the systemic disadvantages and the complexity off the table while providing access to that core data in new and unique ways it's just really powerful. It really allows you to reinvest your data in new ways and be able to drive better business. And the cherry on top is being able to leverage modern technologies that are well understood, cloud technologies, S3 storage, different techniques in Linux and so on, and the parallelism that drives the performance. So it's a really exciting package.
And finally, Tomer.
So I agree with what both Jason and Tim said. In my view, the fact that up until today the mainframe data wasn't being used as much for AI and ML is a key factor for embracing hybrid cloud and having those flexibility and scalability capabilities of a hybrid cloud. These are key factors in embracing hybrid cloud for mainframes as well.
Well, this has been a great conversation, wide-ranging. Jason, Tim, Tomer, thanks again for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us, Matt.
Thank you.
And as always, thank you to our listeners. I'll include some links for more information in the show notes. Thanks again for joining us today, and we'll talk to you next time on The Modern Mainframe. Take care. You're listening to The Modern Mainframe, BMC's intelligent Z optimization and transformation podcast, covering the latest trends and issues on the mainframe and how BMC AIME and BMC CompuWare Solutions can help you build a mainframe-inclusive DevOps toolchain.